Okay, we're looking for the perfect viewing spot to read chapter 2 of Growing Forward When You Can't Go Back. I'm going to take you down. This is one of my favorite exercise staircases. I'm going to take you down all the way and show you where sometimes I like to go, mostly just for exercise, but often pause for a break. I'm at Panorama Park in Deep Cove, North Vancouver, in my neighborhood. It's a lot of stairs, huh? A lot of work to get to chapter 2. Hopefully nobody will be down there. Usually there's not anyone sitting down there, but there are fairly often I see people doing the stairs. I come up these stairs backwards. Extremely good exercise. But I won't do that while I be holding a phone because they all go tumbling down. Okay, this is our little dock. I think this is a water pump or something. I don't know what this big green thing is, but okay, this is Deep Cove. And what I'm gonna do is find a spot to set you down. Where would you like to sit and look while I read chapter 1? Well, I don't think you have much. Oh yeah, that's Quarry Rock straight ahead. I don't think you have much choice. That's Quarry Rock. Okay, so give me a couple seconds to set up the camera and then we'll get into chapter 2. Okay, you're all set up and so am I. Chapter 2 of Growing Forward When You Can't Go Back. I'm going to read excerpts of my story. When I wrote this book, I thought it would be a good idea to divide it up into chapters. So each chapter has a snippet of my story, a snippet of a woman of the Bible, of her story, and some blossom tips to help the reader grow forward through different stages of life. I thought that reading each chapter through would be too choppy and hard to understand. So I decided, since a couple of people have asked me more for my story, I decided I would just stick with reading my story for this experiment of reading through Growing Forward When You Can't Go Back. So chapter 2, Sprouting with Sarah. Waiting isn't easy, especially when there's nothing else you can do. These blossom tips will help you wait with hope and peace. They're woven through my infertility story and Sarah's decision to fulfill God's promises in her own time, not his. Here we discover how to avoid the temptations, trials, and troubles often found in the waiting place. Bye-bye, baby. After 17 years of friendship, founded on camping adventures, road trips, hot debates, and cold spells, Bruce and I got married. We met when I was an 18-year-old waitress and he a 21-year-old bartender at Chi-Chi's Mexican restaurant. Nope, it wasn't love at first sight over spicy chicken fajitas and frosty lime margaritas. In fact, Bruce and I lost touch for the 3 years that I lived in Kenya. But when we found our way back together, we knew it was time. Bruce was 38 and I was 35 when we vowed to love each other through better or worse. Of course, we didn't have a clue what worse actually meant. We suspected kids would test our marriage, and they did, by stubbornly refusing to show up. Bruce was born ready to be a father. He's the youngest of 6 kids and wanted 8 of his own. I, on the other hand, was a late bloomer. At 37, I was finally ready to start our family. We spent a year trying to get pregnant, then a year of fertility tests. We assumed, and the doctors confirmed, that our age made it hard to conceive, but we believed we'd have at least 1 child. God had brought us together after all these years, hadn't he? We're called to be fruitful and multiply, aren't we? Of course we'll get pregnant. We kept praying and consulting fertility experts, naturopathic doctors, and pregnancy books. We also clung to the stories of infertile couples in Scripture who eventually celebrated baby miracles, like our biblical sister Sarah. The I word, infertility. After years of disappointing pregnancy tests, Bruce and I added a new word to our vocabulary, azoospermia. His body didn't make sperm because of a genetic anomaly. Hello, infertility. We tried a variety of medical treatments. We welcomed prayers for healing and anointing. We were blessed under prayer shawls. One prayer begged God to forgive us for the sins blocking His gift of children, though Bruce and I never believed that sin was the problem. We discussed fostering and adopting children, but didn't feel drawn to either option. We grieved the loss of our hopes and dreams of raising a family. However, while our hearts will always carry wisps and shadows of sorrow, we trust God's plan. In fact, I often wondered if God was protecting us from something. What if our baby was born with an infirmity I couldn't handle? What if my mom's schizophrenia was passed to our child? I believe God has good reasons for not favoring us with kids, and I savor the benefits of being childless. I have plenty of time and energy to write my She Blossoms books and blogs and YouTube channel. I love my life in all its bittersweetness. My willingness to move forward with peace and joy had a huge impact on Bruce. His heart was set on having a big family. The azoospermia diagnosis was shocking and almost unbelievable. Perhaps he would have wrestled longer with disappointment and grief if I hadn't embraced this change in direction. Bruce and I walked into a new season of life together, only later realizing how much of an impact we had on each other. The waiting place. Carol, a volunteer puppy raiser that I mentioned in the first chapter of Growing Forward, also struggled with infertility. She also wanted to be a mom, but she didn't marry until she was 30. God promised her children, she believed, and she held on to that belief for 14 long years. Finally, just after she turned 45, Carol and her husband celebrated the birth of their first and only son. He was conceived without fertility treatments, medications, or doctors, just prayers and patience. Some seasons were harder than others, said Carol. Christmas was painful because it's all about kids. Springtime was rough because pregnant women are everywhere. When I was trying to conceive, it seemed like everyone else got pregnant easily. My friends, family, and co-workers all seemed to be able to have children, except for me. Carol struggled through years of liminal space, which is that transitional time between two events. It's the time spent trying to get pregnant, waiting for medical test results, or even wondering if a lump or mole is cancer. It's waiting to see if you'll get the job, sell the house, or be accepted into the program. Liminal space is a period of uncertainty and yearning, wishing and hoping. It can be a time of sadness and healing, such as after a relationship ends. It might be a season of darkness, grief, and isolation. Sometimes liminal space lasts a long time, as it did for Carol. Other times, it whooshes by like a flower blooming when you weren't looking. Sometimes you can actually see growth, little green sprouts poking through the soil, reaching for the sun. See, I am doing a new thing, God says. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Betrayed by her body. When Bruce and I were trying to conceive, we struggled with the emotional and psychological pain of infertility. But Bruce had an additional problem. He was disappointed and dismayed by his own body. Infertility affects men and women equally, but people often assume it's a female issue. So did we. His diagnosis was also shocking because azoospermia has no signs or symptoms. We were completely caught off guard. Man or woman, it's heartbreaking to learn something so mind-boggling about yourself. Carol, who struggled with female fertility issues, felt betrayed by her own body.
I wanted to conceive so badly, she said, but my body refused to get pregnant. All I wanted was to be a mom, ever since I was 13 years old. I felt confident God would bless me with a child later in life. But the spring I turned 42 was one of the worst seasons I ever experienced. My faith started to crumble. Other people knew how badly I wanted a baby, which made things worse. Carol felt unworthy, insecure, and ashamed. She battled her body, struggling to take care of it so she could conceive while resenting it for not cooperating. She was constantly reminded that her body wasn't working the way it was supposed to, the way God created it to. She and her husband discussed fertility treatments but didn't feel compelled to proceed. Carol believed that God would bless them with a baby, so they kept waiting, trying, and praying. Leaving it with God. Carol struggled to leave her dream of getting pregnant in God's hands. She kept taking it back, fretting, obsessing, and lamenting. But despite occasionally straying off course and falling into a pit of despair, she faithfully held on to God's promise. A lot of people asked me about adoption or fostering children, but I didn't want to take things in my own hands, she said. I didn't want to step outside God's will because I really did feel like I had a promise from the Lord. I still dealt with longings and disappointment, but I decided to keep waiting and trusting. And God eventually honored my patience and faith with the baby. Carol and her husband were blessed with a son. Bruce and I, however, experienced a different ending. Not happier or sadder, or better or worse, just different. We never felt that God had promised us children. We would have loved to have had a family together, but it just wasn't His will for us. My heart melts when I see a pregnant woman or hold a baby, but I'm sincerely happy for couples who are blessed with children. Their joy doesn't affect who I am. God doesn't always answer our prayers the way we want. But if we knew what He knows, if we could see the big picture with all the pieces, perhaps we'd ask for exactly what we have. Growing forward. May you be filled with peace and faith as you walk forward boldly and humbly. Trust that if you knew what God knows, you wouldn't change anything about your life. May you always be prepared to meet God in surprising places, just like I did in my next chapter, chapter 3. Thank you for being here for chapter 2. I wish you all the best and take good care of yourself because you are worth taking good care of. Mwah! Hey, before we go, I just want to show you this guy rowing his dog all the way home. Row, row, row your boat. Isn't that good? What a good guy. Okay, and then while we're here, I might as well show you how I'm gonna go home. I'll just show you what I'm up against. There we go. Those are the stairs that it's gonna take me back up to my street. Okay guys, see you on the other side.